Good morning.
Good morning.
What kind of flowers do we have today? Tulips.
We are in the middle of winter, but we're already looking forward to spring. Christmas has gone. The wise men came and went yesterday. And yes, we are looking forward to a new beginning of a new year.
Mm-hmm. We certainly are. Actually, today is still Christmas in the Eastern Europe countries.
Yes, Eastern Orthodox celebrates Christmas today, so happy Christmas to all of our Eastern Orthodox friends and family.
Yes.
All right, let's see. Last session, we finished up letter number 113, which was a fairly long letter, wherein KH had a proposal for Sinnett. And he told him, you're probably not going to like this, because he said, in your mind, you're going to think that it's Jesuitical. Meaning their motto was, the end justifies the means. If God wants something to happen, we are entitled to do anything, regardless of who it harms, who it hurts, up to and including murder if it's required, because God wants that to happen. Unfortunately, I'm not quite sure which God it was that they were in touch with, but probably not one that we would condone. So he said it's going to sound Jesuitical, but it's not. And the reason is this. He pointed out that the Jesuits are very political. They had their hands all over politics in Europe, and the only country where they didn't have a lot of control, because it wasn't Roman Catholic, was England. And they were making a big push to gain more control in England at the time. So they were involved in this bill. There were two bills, the Ilbert Bill and the Bengal Rent Bill, which was supposed to re-equalize the relationship between the zemindars and the ryots, the actual farmers who were renting from them. And it looked on the surface like it was designed to give the ryots more help and more rights, which they deserved, but in truth, there were some tricks built into it that would have prevented it from working that way. So the Mahatmas had received permission from their superiors, and they were very much on board with it to help the riots. And KH explained to Sinnett that this bill, although not in its original form, but the concept of it was going to pass. And he was right, it did pass. But it was changed quite a bit before that happened. So what KH wanted him to do, and if you don't know the story, please go back and review our last session. But what he wanted him to do was to pretend to be on the side of the zemindars. And he said, you can do that because you can point out the defects in this bill. There are some serious defects. Nothing wrong with that. But KH said, you're probably not going to see it that way. So if you do go along with this, then we have permission to continue our communications. But if you choose not to, then we have to pursue other means. And that requires that we will have to cut communications. So it kind of puts Sinnett in a bad position. Now we've got a resolution to this. In the meantime, Sinnett did write a letter to KH, and he very reluctantly agreed to it, but he had a specific stipulation, and we'll find out what that is. Letter number 114, this was received on October 8th, 1883, in London.
Due to a temporary absence, I was unaware of your current affairs, and it was only today that I had the leisure to give them a thought. Upon reading your letter, the situation presented itself to me so vividly that I immediately decided to give you your freedom, and so I sent you a telegram. This was with the object of removing any feeling of compulsion, moral or otherwise, and of leaving you to either accept or reject any further proposals which may come to you from any part of India. If any consideration could have prompted a different course, it would have been entirely removed by the tone of your letter of August 16th. Interesting. You think that endorsing the Bengal measure in the present state of affairs would ruin every prospect of commercial success of the proposed journal. You say, quote, "The Phoenix cannot possibly, as now designed, be a commercial success, and a paper which is a commercial failure can have very little political weight." End quote. Thus, to persist would, as you see it, lead a number of persons to fruitlessly waste a large sum of money, and, quote, "The project thus crippled is pretty effectively stripped of its grand financial possibilities," end quote. Still, despite all this, you are disposed to go ahead if I wish you to, cast the moral responsibility on me, and, quote, "swallow the somewhat repulsive pledge."
Yeah, so as he predicted in our last session,
Sinnett wasn't happy about it.
no, he wasn't happy at all. And he said, well, okay, I will go along with it, but only on one condition. If you accept responsibility for what happens. Let's see what KH replies.
It's interesting that Sinnett is appearing to have a certain strong ethical compass in this moment, and KH is explaining why this is ethical to do. Sinnett doesn't believe it is. He believes the masters are not being honest in a way with this.
And the real problem is he's concerned with his image among the British people. He has quite a position. He is well respected in London. Mm-hmm. Here is a young man, 43 years old.
Sinnett was 43 at this time?
Yeah. He's 43, and he's already been editor of 3 different papers. He was a lead editor for the Manchester Guardian when he was very young, in his early 20s. Then he took a position in Hong Kong as the editor of the Daily Mail. And then a few years ago, he took the position of the editor of the Pioneer, the biggest English language newspaper in India. So he had a huge, very well recognized reputation. Mm-hmm. And he wasn't keen to lose that position. Mm-hmm. But KH has pointed out several times, including in our last session, he said, to you, appearance is everything. Mm. To us, it isn't. And he even, in juxtaposition to the Jesuit motto, the end justifies the means, he quoted something that the Buddha said, which basically said the arhats, down to the very chelas, all of those who are devoted Buddhists to the core, don't care about the opinions of the outer world. We only care about helping humanity. That is our only motivation. So it's a big difference. Mm-hmm. Sinnett is still very ensconced in the outer world, and especially in London society. So they've tried very hard to overcome that, but it's a hard thing to overcome for Sinnett.
My friend, you shall do nothing of the sort.
Meaning, put the responsibility on KH.
Mm-hmm. The responsibility would be yours, since you were clearly given the option in my last letter. Henceforth, if you have anything more to do with this unfortunate affair, it must be entirely based on your own judgment and will be your responsibility. You have misunderstood the law of karma, and my letter, if you imagine that I would dare to provoke karma's awful retaliation by forcing you to take up a line of action with such feelings in your heart. Knowing you, it was easy to foresee your repulsion for the work contemplated. Therefore, I took great care to impress upon you that you were entirely free in your choice. I blame myself only for one thing, having hinted at the probability that you would refuse, as implied in my pledge to the Chauhan to abstain from then on from collaboration with Europeans. until some more favorable time in the future. Wait, so he's saying he blames himself for just hinting at the probability that you'd refuse, as opposed to telling the Chohan he will definitely refuse.
Well,
is that what he means by
yes, but he should have not mentioned anything to Sinnett. He should have just presented it without saying, you're probably not going to like this.
Oh, well, he said that like 18
He did.
times.
He made it very clear, you're probably not going to like this.
Yeah.
But now he's saying, I should have just presented it and given you the complete option of stating what you wanted.
He probably would have said no easier than now saying yes begrudgingly.
Well, Sinnett was between a rock and a hard place because the option was to accept the proposal and maintain communications with the Mahatmas, or reject it and know that that was the end. And he wasn't very keen to do that either, because he was getting a lot of attention because of these letters. So in his mind, that was not even a logical choice. Of course, he has to do whatever he has to do to keep those communications going. He isn't quite ready to give up his position in society.
It was that which caused you to, quote, swallow the repulsive pledge more than anything else I said. This goes to my karma, but aside from this, if you reread my last letter, you will see that the necessity for independent, unbiased action on your part was strongly urged. I hoped it would be possible to found a journal, so obviously necessary at this great crisis, on a basis thoroughly satisfactory to you and to all who might be involved. I had forgotten that external appearances are everything in your world, and that I was simply subjecting you to be regarded with contempt.
Ever since Sinnett moved back to London, things are very different. When he was in India, he was in the territory of the Mahatmas, and he was much more involved with and immersed in a world that was somewhat similar to the Mahatmas world. It was Indian culture and Indian philosophy that was all around him. He's been removed from that and taken back to London by his own choice. And now he's like, oh, wait, that's right. I am British. I'm a Londoner. I belong here. These are my people. So, yeah, he's back in his old element and has given up the element he's been living in for several years.
But rest assured, if the money had been collected as first attempted and no pressure of working in a certain direction had been offered to you, and if you had been entirely your own master in the line of policy pursued, even so, at this hour of bitter hatred, of mutual malice and contempt, the mere fact that you were advocating the cause of the despised and now more than ever hated and downtrodden dark race would have stripped the phoenix of even a shadow of any, quote, grand financial possibility, end quote.
So Sinnett is convinced that if he does that, there's no way that this newspaper is going to make money. That's going to put me in a bad light, both with the Indians and with the Europeans. And I don't see how that's possibly going to be a financial success. Now, Sinnett, when he moved back to London, had accumulated the equivalent of about $800,000 in today's money. And he was planning to invest a good portion of that in this newspaper. So he was going to be involved in it financially as well, and he was counting on that being his source of income for many, many years to come. So that's got to figure into the equation also.
Still, barely a month ago, I was so confident from seeing the still deep, strong feelings lurking in the national soul that I allowed you to grow even more confident than myself. Others, whose intuition and foresight had not been blinded by their superiors, thought differently, and some tried to dissuade me. Yet, the aim being so worthy, and the possibility of success being real, I was permitted to watch the project and use natural external means to aid in its coming into existence.
Remember, this was one instance in which he was allowed by the Chauhan and probably his superiors to actually use his powers to make this happen. So that was a real detour from what they normally do. He normally says, I'm not allowed to use any of my special powers. This time he was. That's why he was so convinced that it would be successful.
If indefinite waiting were practical, the original scheme could be accomplished, but that is not the case, and I must therefore withdraw the last appearance of constraint on your free judgment and thank you for having so loyally seconded the attempt to do good to India, even at the cost of your feelings and pecuniary interests. I am not willing to draw you into a position where I could not repay you in any way for loss of social prestige or for financial losses. To do that is beyond my power. I could not look at you if you constantly felt you were regarded as dishonorable and lacking character.
And that's what Sinnett expected from the English people if he did what was proposed.
If your lot was to be cast with ours, such considerations would not weigh one bit. That's interesting. Because to all of us who are obligated workers, whether Chauhan or Chela, the first and last consideration is whether we can do good to our neighbor, no matter how humble he may be. And we do not permit ourselves to even think of the danger of any insults, abuse, or injustice thrown at us.
So any want-to-be chelas today who are hoping to gain the attention of the Mahatmas, this is what you're up against. If you're still worried about what other people think about you and about meeting their social expectations, and they're keeping track of how many people sent them Christmas gifts and who we sent Christmas gifts to,
It's exhausting.
It's not going to work. You have to really divorce yourself from this playing games socially with people, because there isn't time for both. You can either be in the outer world or you can be in the inner world. How many times has he said, come out of your world into ours? But Sinnett obviously is not ready to do that.
We are ready to be spat upon and crucified daily.
And that's in quotes, so apparently Sinnett said that in his letters in some context.
Yeah. Gosh. If good to others can come of it. Wow. But the case is totally different with you. You have your path to tread in the more, quote, practical world. And your standing in it must not be jeopardized.
Yeah. So that's his choice. He has pretty much decided that the outer world is still very important to him. We're beginning to see that KH is in a difficult position too, as well as Sinnett. They're not exactly seeing eye to eye. KH was extremely optimistic on many fronts, but more than anything, he was optimistic that Sinnett would receive enough information and his intuition would kick in enough that he would be willing to give up that to a large extent and not care what other people thought about him. But that wasn't the case. KH was wrong. Mm-hmm. And he's realizing now that Sinnett cares very much what the outer world thinks about him.
Mm-hmm. Again, the contributors of capital must be treated fairly. Among them are wealthy zemindars, but there are also poor patriots who have made great efforts to subscribe their small sums from pure reverence to us and love of our motherland.
And this is a new concept. We knew that Subbarao and HPB and Olcott and some of the other little people without lots of money were contributing money to this project. But this is the first time that we realize there's a larger number of people who are collecting and saving their rupees to try to help.
Giving what they can. At least 50 such are awaiting the latest turn of events and managing their resources until the last moment before sending their remittances to Calcutta.
Calcutta, why Calcutta? Because, first of all, Calcutta was the capital of India at the time. Remember, during the episode of the Vega, which took place in Calcutta with Colonel Gordon and his wife, and with Olcott, who was visiting at the time, and HPB, who was in Bombay. I didn't realize it, but at the time, there were actually 2 time zones in India. There was Calcutta time, with Calcutta being on the extreme east coast of India, and there was Bombay time, which was on the west coast. So because of the railway system, at some point they had created 2 time zones, and everybody referred either to Bombay time or to Calcutta time. In 1947, when India gained its independence, they decided to only have 1 time zone for the entire country. So what did they do?
They put it as a 30-minute or half-hour time zone. Is that the only one on Earth that's like that?
I think it's the only one that's at the half hour.
Okay.
There is one, and I think it's Nepal, which is 45 minutes.
Oh, that's weird.
Difference.
That's strange.
So
it's like GMT plus 6.5 or something.
5.5, I believe, something like that.
That's funny.
Yes.
Yeah. It's logical to do that.
Yeah, it is. It works for them, but it makes calculations difficult for other people.
That's funny. Devoted theosophists in various parts of India have been actively soliciting subscriptions on the theory of possible profit to capital set forth in Mr. Morgan's circulars.
Now, Mr. Morgan was actually a major general in the British Army in India, and he was a member of the Theosophical Society, I believe in Calcutta. So the Gordons were in Calcutta, Major Morgan was there, Major General Morgan, and he had been soliciting funds. He had been using all of his influence to try to get funds for this newspaper. Sinnett also had agents that he had negotiated with, solicitors, in Calcutta so that they could collect any money that was pledged and secure it in a bank and be ready to create the whole process. He had done a lot of groundwork ahead of time for this newspaper so that when the money came in, boom, they were ready to go right now.
Devoted theosophists in various parts of India have been actively soliciting subscriptions on the theory of possible profit to capital set forth in Mr. Morgan's circulars. The project has been vigorously promoted by Olcott, Colonel Gordon, Norendro, and others known and unknown to you.
Norendro was Norendro Nath Sen, who was the editor of another newspaper in India, and his headquarters were in Calcutta, and that newspaper was called the Indian Mirror. And Norendro was a chela of KH. So, despite the fact that he was the editor of a newspaper himself, he was very much involved in helping to raise money for this new newspaper.
A financial disaster to the Phoenix of the nature you anticipate would compromise the personal influence of all. And finally, unless your personal faith in me is so blind as to swallow your last instinct of prudence, you would not risk your own hard-earned capital in a foredoomed failure, and so could not, in good conscience, allow anyone else to do it. Unless you were allowed to, quote, cast the moral responsibility upon me. In short, to make me, if that were possible, force it to be successful. If that had been permitted, the journal would have already been founded and would be making its voice heard in India already. But KH wouldn't even want to do that because he knows that that would be interfering with the natural course of karma, and you can't just force it upon people.
If there's good karma, it wouldn't belong to Sinnett. Because he turned that responsibility over to KH, and he said, no, I'm not going to do it.
If that was even possible, though, you can't just do that. You can't just say, I'm going to give them my karma. You can't really even do that.
Yeah, and here's the thing. The Mahatmas understand karma inside and out. They calculate very carefully what they say and do in all of their interactions because of that. Because they are involved in the outer world, they still can get, and they do get karma.
They participate in it.
But they do it consciously. Mm-hmm. We do it unconsciously 1,000 times a day.
We could be more conscious about it.
We could if we made the effort. So that's up to us.
Next time you run a red light, just know that you're choosing that, and there'll be something that comes back. Not exactly an eye for an eye, but something.
Yes.
If you take a few pens home from the office, just consciously do it. So you'll be prepared when someone takes pens from your house. You don't get mad at them.
Yes.
I'm being funny, but...
No, so many things. Everything that we do, especially when we try to help people. If someone approaches you and says, hey, I'm filing for bankruptcy, but I want to hide some of my assets. Can I put some of my assets in your name and hold them for me so that I won't have to declare those? There's karma.
This conversation is very interesting, and we love this conversation. It can be expanded to things that you probably might not have ever even thought of. Whenever any business service provider or anyone that you're paying asks for the payment in cash, usually they are doing that because they don't want to claim it as income.
Yeah.
And you participate. I mean, we can't really do much about it. You can refuse, but then you don't get the service.
Little things like that we have to be thinking about. And most people don't think twice about it. It's like, oh, sure, no problem. Yeah, we create karma unknowingly at every turn, every day of our life.
There are so many things to discuss about it. It's fascinating. And then a counter argument might be, well, the government is being unethical to ask for this many taxes on this income. So I'm not being unethical by not claiming it. Some people believe that, and so there are opinions there. It's a different conversation, but it's just very fascinating about this karma.
It's called justification. Mm-hmm. You're doing something wrong, and yet you figure out a way to make it okay. But karma doesn't see it that way. Your motive and your intention is everything with karma. Yeah, there's a lot that we need to learn that the Mahatmas have learned long ago. Mm-hmm. Here's the other thing. At some point when you say, okay, now I'm ready to give up all of my connections with the outer world and really devote myself to this, you've got this great big bag of karma sitting there. And it's like, yeah, but I don't want to have to deal with that. Well, you have no choice. And it may take 3 or 4 lifetimes just to get that diminished down to where you can actually do what your new goal is. And don't complain when you have innumerable problems in life. Because if you're trying to work off that karma as quickly as possible, some people have an enormous amount to overcome.
This process, if you've never thought about it, seems vague and nebulous, and how does that even work? And how do I know if I'm clearing karma or not? Can't I just do some special magic? I think we have a simple way to explain how to clear that bag of karma. And simply put, I'll try to say it in as easy words as I can. When you have challenging situations, how do you handle them? Do you move through them consciously and mindfully and resolve the challenging situation? In our view, that's how you clear the bag of karma. If you fight it and wish it wasn't happening and say it's not fair, it shouldn't be this way, and if you maybe settle it down in some way but fix it by force, you force the person out by threatening their family or something, oh, I solved that, it's done. Come on. Did you really get rid of that karma? No. This is the way to clear the bag. You handle the situations that come your way like a yogi would. And that's how we clear karma. Is there any other suggestion on how to clear it? I mean, that's really it.
What you said is absolutely correct. Accepting responsibility. That's the whole thing in a nutshell.
Not that you caused it per se, but it's here. I need to handle this. It's here. Not that I physically made this happen right now, but it's here. I got to handle it.
And you don't know what you may have done in a previous lifetime.
Well, clearly it's our bag. Clearly it's from us because it's here. It's in our life. It's showing up for me.
Exactly. If you had no karma, your life would just be zen. Mm-hmm. Completely zen. Most people would hate that. They love the drama, so they're creating more and more karma because they're so addicted to the ups and downs of emotions.
Our viewers are probably saying, get back to the letter. You guys got off track. Get back to the letter.
No, not at all. No, we've got a short one today.
I love talking about this stuff, though. It's because these are things that not many people think about. And we wonder why life seems tough or unfair. Because you got a bag of karma that your soul wants you to work out.
This is the practical part of the teaching.
It is.
And Sinnett is dead set against it. He's not ready to do that. He's not understanding. Remember a couple of sessions ago, K.H. said neither Sinnett nor Olcott grasped fully what chela-ship is all about. So even Olcott, as devoted as he was resistant in some ways.
You know, in Sinnett's defense, though, I will say they didn't have an Eckhart Tolle. K.H., we love you, dude. You might not have explained this as well as Eckhart Tolle did. I'm sorry to say. Seriously, though, most of the teachings are profound and deep and cosmic, literally cosmic in nature. There's been very little of this kind of practical everyday teaching. So Sinnett, I mean, I got to say, he hasn't had much specific instruction on how to do this.
No.
If he had a New Earth book back then to work on pain body and ego, and that's the whole thing, the disappearance that Cage is talking about, it's ego that Eckhart Tolle teaches.
And we are extremely lucky to have that available. When Paul discovered that book and introduced it to me years ago, I kind of thought, well, it's probably one more of those wannabe gurus who teach nonsense and feel-good stuff. Mm-hmm. And when I read it, I realized this is completely different.
I'm glad you read it.
Totally different. It was by reading and studying that book and doing a series of classes on it that we realized this is what is missing in theosophy, the practical side of it. If Sinnett, as you say, had had that available in 1883, he could have understood that and said, Holy Toledo, this makes so much sense.
Or if you would have had Taimni commentating on the sutras, that's another amazing one. The ruthless stripping away of the ego, to quote Taimni, who's a theosophist.
Right. They knew very little about Raja Yoga.
Yeah.
The people in India knew much more about it. And K.H., I think, didn't realize just how much of a difference that was between their Asian chelas and their European chelas. The Europeans had a vague notion of Raja Yoga, but it wasn't clear, it wasn't accurate, and they didn't really think it was all that important.
Maybe we should put those videos on the YouTube channel of that class that we taught in 2009.
We can do that.
We should just put them on.
Are they all on video?
Oh,
I don't think
video
so.
Record those.
No, we didn't video.
Oh my gosh, that's right.
Yeah, that was before we were smart enough to do that.
It's a video, yeah. Boo.
Oh, well.
Maybe we'll redo it. Well, that's where our book came from, basically. But
it is absolutely where it came from. So when we recommend Eckhart Tolle's books, and he only wrote 2 that were really important, I wish everyone would study those and keep them close by, because that's what opened our eyes.
Yeah. To the practical side of this. Okay, continuing. I would have phrased my dispatch of today even stronger, except that I should, by telling you to abandon the affair, again assume the responsibility of blocking your free will. It is best that you should give the Bengal party the chance to state their conditions definitely and then answer yes or no. To save you time and expense, I asked Olcott to have Norendro Babu send him the Zemindar's proposals, so he may immediately, knowing your views and character, say whether or not they are fit to lay before you.
Yeah, because of the mail, it took about a month to get each letter back and forth, just one direction.
That's a long time.
Yeah, so 2 months.
Jeez.
Sinnett writes a letter, a month to arrive in India, then another month to get back. So he said, to save time, I asked Norendro, my chela, to look at any proposals that the zemindars offer and to analyze them based on what he thinks you would accept or reject.
I wonder why we haven't heard of Norendro before. We've heard of a lot of
He's
other...
mentioned the name, I think, once, but only once before. But now it's more clear as to why Norendro is quite involved in this particular process.
What a cool task, being asked by your Mahatma to serve in this capacity. That'd be amazing.
Yeah,
That'd be an honor to...
Look at the difference between Norendro. I don't know if he was an accepted chela or not, but he was a chela and was definitely making great progress. And Sinnett, who has been given so much attention, and yet he's still pretty iffy about, are you all in or not? He's not all in, to use a poker term. He isn't all in because he's still got lots of ties and attachments to the outer world.
And if they aren't fit, he's saying, fit.
Right. So Norendro was going to analyze things. If they are fit, they will go ahead and send them to Sinnett. If not...
If they aren't, that he should immediately communicate with your Calcutta solicitors as you requested.
Yeah. So those are his agents in Calcutta that kind of act on his behalf.
This is the present situation, and it's very bad for India. It is premature for me to tell you more of the secret influence that has brought it on, but you may hear of it later.
Yeah, as we have said, the situation looks extremely murky because there are so many people involved in trying to manipulate the situation to suit their own purposes, including the Jesuits. We saw that last time, just how involved they were in trying to use that to manipulate more power for themselves in England.
Nor may I forecast the future, except so far as to draw more than ever your attention to the black clouds that are gathering over the political sky. I told you long ago to expect many great disturbances of all kinds as one cycle was closing and the other beginning its fateful activities.
I'm not sure exactly which cycle he's talking about. The 7-year cycle had closed almost a year previous, but he may be talking about a sub-cycle within the Kali Yuga cycle.
Wait, the 7-year experiment of the TS had already ended by this time?
Yes, this is 1883. That ended in November 1882.
Oh.
So remember, the resolution of that was it would continue for another 7 years, but greatly restricted.
In terms of
in terms of communication and in terms of the Mahatmas' involvement, yes.
Okay. You already see in the seismological phenomena lately some of the proof. Oh, wow. So this is the geology of Earth.
No, he's talking about the upheaval politically.
Okay. You will see a great many more soon. And if we have to regret the implosion of a humanitarian project, it should at least mitigate the severity of your disappointment to feel that, in a bad time like this, one has to contend against both seen and unseen influences of the most hostile nature.
Yeah, so much going on behind the scenes that the Mahatmas know about, but they can't communicate all of that to Sinnett, and he's going to be totally unaware of it.
And now, concluding on a more pleasant note, your decision to follow my lead in the Phoenix matter, even though you think it will result in social degradation and pecuniary loss, has had a karmic reward already, or at least that's what I conclude, based on the results. Although it wasn't meant as a test, something which you despise, nevertheless, you were as good as tested, and you didn't flinch. The decree of contingent non-communication between us has been partially revoked. Oh, what?
Yeah.
Partially?
Well, let's see what he said.
Okay. The prohibition with regard to other Europeans is as strict as ever, but in your case, it is removed. Oh, okay.
Yeah. So
good.
we're not communicating anymore with any other Europeans. but we will continue to communicate with you.
It's like they're the naughty ones. They're being punished.
Well, they've invested so much time with numerous people that they've tested and tried to bring along, and they're giving up on that at this point, except with Sinnett. He's basically their last option.
Well, I guess that means he's not talking to Hume anymore either.
They might just to try to keep him from creating too much problem, but there's not a whole lot they can do in that direction.
And I know this consent has a direct bearing on your consent, the great sacrifice of your personal feelings in the present situation. Quote, this pelling was found to have, quote, really redeeming qualities, but be warned, my friend, that this is not the last of your tests.
The quote that this pelling was found to have really redeeming qualities must have come from one of the other Mahatmas, maybe the Chauhan. I'm not sure who it was that said that. So now speaking about tests, he says,
it is not I who create them, but you, by your struggle for light and truth against the world's dark influences.
Yeah. And that is what all of our tests are. It's all about determining whether or not you have the discernment that is required to analyze and to observe and tell what is right, what is wrong, what is correct, what is useful, what is not useful, what do I keep, what do I get rid of. That's what every test is about. And it's also how much you have implemented the information you already have. You get tested on that. Life is like that. School is like that. They give you the information, you practice it, and then you get a test to see how much did you actually absorb and retain.
The Mahatmas certainly do give them tests intentionally.
Yeah.
In this case, he's saying it's not I that is creating them.
But yeah, it's your intention. If you didn't have any intention of becoming a chela, you wouldn't be tested.
Oh, they wouldn't spend their time on you, right. Be more careful as to what you say regarding forbidden topics. The, quote, eighth sphere, this is a mystery. The eighth sphere mystery is a very confidential subject, and you are far from understanding even its general aspect.
Yes. Remember Sinnett's fascination with the eighth sphere and Avichi. In his book, Esoteric Buddhism, he included information about that.
But he was allowed.
They gave him free rein.
But they reviewed it too, and they said, you wrote a great book here.
Yes. Twice he said that. There isn't much that is incorrect, very little that is completely incorrect. But it wasn't that that was incorrect, but KH had several times told him specifically, this is not information we like to talk about. We tell you about it, but we're very reluctant to share, and there is a lot that we cannot share about it.
So he's saying here, just like, be careful with it. Just be careful sharing.
But the readers of his book, Esoteric Buddhism, latched on to that. And some of them made fun of it and derided it, and they were just having a heyday with it. So it created a bit of a mess, and the Mahatmas weren't too happy about that. So KH was telling him, basically, it would have been better if you had not mentioned it or glossed over it. But what happened was that C.C. Massey and some of the other members, including Hume, used that as an excuse to just flood the Theosophists with articles and complaints, observations that were derogatory about it. So what happened was that with all of these questions and articles about it, HPB was just inundated. And Moria was dictating letters to her to write. And she said, I spend all my time and I write 3 pages for every page of question that the other person asks in the Theosophist, and I'm just exhausted by all of this effort. So it created a bit of a firestorm that was not really helpful to the work.
You were repeatedly warned and should not have mentioned it. You have unintentionally brought ridicule upon a solemn matter. I have nothing to do with the replies to Mr. Myers, but you may recognize the brusque influence of Moria in them.
Like I said, Moria dictated most of the replies to HPB, and as we know, Moria is pretty direct and to the point, whereas KH tries to spare people's feelings. And I think KH is beginning to realize a long time ago that Moria probably has the better approach. Just state it the way it is and leave it.
And then he signs KH. No fancy closing.
Affectionately.
Yeah, affectionately, right.
Yeah, as we've noted, he's a little more withdrawn at this point. Here's a PS, though, to the letter.
I am advised to ask that you send future communications to me either through Damodar or Henry Olcott. Madam B's discretion decreases in proportion to her physiological enfeeblement.
Yeah, she's been through so much, and now with these additional problems with him mentioning Avichi and the eighth sphere, she's getting even more agitated. So he says, write to either Damodar or Olcott, and they will get the letter to me.
How would Olcott do that?
Now, Olcott didn't have the ability to send it himself, but what I think is that when he received it, wherever he was in India, that because of HPB's energy field, that would create the channel by which the Mahatmas could extract it or transmit it themselves. They may not have had to do it. They probably actually took the letter because they keep those. They're much better than Sinnett was at organizing them. But then, too, they have the ability to read the Akashic records whenever necessary. So that's the end of letter number 114. Now, speaking of Akashic records, we have a very different situation, and this isn't even a letter to or from Sinnett. This is something that happened to Olcott. And why these were included in the Mahatma Letters that are in the British Library, I don't know, but it's very interesting. So let's go ahead and read the first letter. I'll just mention that Olcott was on a tour of northern India, and he had taken two other people with him. One was Damodar, because he was requested to do that, and the other one was a recently arrived young theosophist from Scotland, Mr. W.T. Brown. KH, in his astral body, visited the location where they were staying, and he precipitated a letter in the hand of Olcott, and then he went next door to where this W.T. Brown was, who was frightened, but he precipitated a letter in his hand too.
Wow.
Both received Mahatma Letters precipitated right in their hand, with HPB 2,000 miles away. So here's what happened a few days later after that event. This is actually a telegram, and it was sent from Jammu, which is the extreme northern part of India. Kashmir and Jammu are that little triangular sort of area at the very northern tip of India. And this was sent November 25th to Adyar. So go ahead and read the telegram. Now, Olcott is in a panic, and so he sent this to HPB.
To Madame Blavatsky from Colonel Olcott. The masters have taken Damodar. Return not promised.
Uh-oh. So He woke up one morning and Damodar had disappeared.
I wonder how he knows the masters took him, though.
Well, we'll find out.
Okay.
So when HPB received this, there was the telegram that was delivered by the peon that delivered it. But added to the telegram in KH's blue pencil was a note. And he said, "We will send him back, KH."
The masters have taken Damodar, return not promised.
Yeah, so Olcott was in a panic, but then he was assured, both in a letter and to HPB. Now, this was sent at 10:15 Jammu time, which I think was the same as Bombay time. So it was sent at 10:15 a.m. because they used military time. Then later in the day, he got additional information.
Olcott hasn't met the masters in person.
Well, let's see. This is when he did meet them in person, and I believe that was the first time physically, because KH actually showed up and had a long conversation with him. But they also took Damodar to some location, which we will find out. Okay. So later in the day, when he was a little calmer and had received additional information, he sent a longer telegram to Madame Blavatsky.
So same day, just later in the day.
This one, we don't know what time it was sent, but HPB received it at 17:30, so 5:30 p.m.
To Madame Blavatsky, editor of the Theosophist, from Colonel Olcott. Damodar left before dawn. At about 8 o'clock, letters from him and Kutumi found on my table. Okay, so he leaves very early in the morning. Then at about 8 a.m., letters from him and Kutumi found on my table. Don't say whether return or not. Damodar bids us all farewell conditionally and says Brother Theosophist should all feel encouraged in knowing that he has found the blessed masters and been called by them. Oh my gosh. The dear boy's recent development astonishing. Huni bids me await. Oh, is that Kuthumi?
Well, whoever it was in the telegraph office couldn't read his writing very well, so they misspelled it.
It was probably KH, though.
Yeah.
Kuthumi bids me await orders. Wow.
So that's what the letters said that he found. But let's read a little excerpt that's on the theosophy.wiki website. Olcott wrote extensively about this whole situation in his book, Old Diary Leaves. He wrote 3 chapters that pertain to this. So this information is mostly taken from that. Go ahead and read what is on the Theosophy Wiki website.
In October and November of 1883, Olcott was touring in northern India. Oh, this is context.
Yeah, this is just a resume of what he wrote.
Okay. Accompanied by Damodar and W.T. Brown, a young theosophist from Scotland. A number of astonishing things happened while Olcott and his associates were on this tour. They are related in detail in Old Diary Leaves, Volume 3. While at Lahore, both Olcott and Brown received visits from the Mahatma K.H. With each of them, on the visit, the Mahatma left a letter enclosed in silk cloth. The letters were simply materialized in their hands. Many other interesting things happened on this tour, but it was at Jammu that Damodar disappeared. Damodar had been a chela of the Mahatma K.H. for a number of years.
In fact, it was about 4 years at this time. He, from the very beginning, was making super fast progress. He was so devoted, so focused on achieving his goal. And remember, it's because, well, we'll find that because it will be mentioned in this little resume.
He had long been aware of the master. When he was a boy, during a severe illness, he received a visit from him and was later able to identify him as the Mahatma K.H. when he saw his portrait at the TS headquarters in Bombay. That's similar to HPB when she had seen him as a kid and then recognized him on the horse.
Right. And we mentioned this before, but the moment he arrived at the headquarters, because he had heard of them when they first arrived in Bombay, he went to visit them. And he looks up, sees this portrait, a drawn portrait of K.H., and he knew exactly who it was. And from then on, he was devoted to HPB. Whatever she said to him was a command.
Quote, "His coming with us on the present tour," says the colonel, "was by command of his guru, and throughout the journey we had many proofs of the progress he was making in spiritual unfolding. Damodar was involved in several of the amazing happenings on the tour. When Olcott awakened on the morning of November 25th to find Damodar gone, with no clue as to where he had gone or when he would return, he searched through the small bungalow in which they were staying but found no one. When he returned to his own room, however, there were notes from both the Mahatma K.H. and Damodar on his table." I wonder if they were there before he got up.
They weren't, because he searched the rooms very carefully.
Mm-hmm.
And so once he got back to his own room, all of a sudden there were 2 letters there.
Mm-hmm. Olcott does not say specifically what was in the notes, but the one from the Mahatma must have been to the effect that they had taken Damodar.
Yeah, a very interesting episode.
Wow.
Damodar was progressing so rapidly. At first, he would be taken by KH at times in his astral body when he was asleep to visit different locations. If you ever want to know more about it, read the book Damodar by Sven Ek, E-E-K, a Swedish theosophist, who collected all information he could on Damodar. It's a very, very interesting book. He's the one chela we know of that never deviated, never faltered, except when he became too aggressive in his intentions. Remember, a year or so ago, KH had to order him to leave the headquarters in Bombay and go to Pune for a month to recuperate because he had ruined his health. He had been working so many hours. Olcott would find him late at night working in the office, and KH ordered him to go to Pune for R&R for a month. That's how devoted he was. The terms he used was because of his foolish austerities. So, yeah, but obviously it made a huge impact on KH that he was so intent. He was going to do everything and not miss a single clue that anybody gave him, as opposed to Sinnett, who is back and forth. So there you go. We have another very interesting episode. In our next episode, it's going to change completely. We're going to get another letter from KH, but it's going to be on a completely different topic. He's going to be talking about something that he wrote several years before and something that appeared in Sinnett's first book 2 years previously in the book Occult World, a charge of plagiarism. KH and Sinnett are being charged with plagiarism.
Wow.
So stay tuned for session number 77 to see what happens, whether or not they are plagiarists. All right. Well, thank you for coming along on this journey with us. We appreciate every one of your views and your comments and the fact that you are paying attention to what we are doing in our own search for information and enlightenment.